Before we begin today's episode, unfortunately I have to give another content warning. This is for the second episode we're going to be talking about today, which is Too Shy. This episode is quite unpleasant in places. It contains a number of scenes of a man stalking women on the internet and then later murdering them. So if you're sensitive to violence against women, things like that, you might want to stop listening after we've talked about today's first episode, which is The List.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And there's no news.
Well, there's a little bit of news. By the time that this airs, we'll have started working on our first Patreon exclusive.
Yeah, it should be up and available. We are going to play the first X-Files game. At least we're going to play the PSX version of the first X-Files game. It did come out on PC.
Did it?
Yeah, no idea if you can even get hold of it like that anymore, but we've got the PSX one to hand.
I think I'd rather play it on the PSX, to be honest, anyway.
That's fair. But yes, we'll have the first episode of that up on Patreon if you'd like to see us try and make sense of this game.
This is the one that was the FMV game from the 90s. I believe it's supposed to be set at around Season 3, so it's about where we're at in the show anyway. But yeah, that won't be shared, obviously, on this channel because it's a Let's Play. You'll have to subscribe to our Patreon if you want to see it.
I suppose then, without for anything else of note, I mean, FileFest has been going quiet a bit for now.
Yeah, I haven't heard much more on it. It's obviously still going ahead. FileFest being the event that's in the Mall of America later this year, and there is also the separate one at the Saratoga Springs X-Files Centre. But yeah, they both sound really exciting and well worth a look in. You can find their websites quite easily online or via Twitter, where I've been following them. Unfortunately, we won't be attending either.
Alas. Maybe in the future. We can certainly go to the 40th, and we're about to go to the 40th anniversaries.
Hooray!
Hey. Oh my god, we're getting old. So, first up this week, we have The List. Directed by Chris Carter, his second episode ever. And written by Chris Carter. First broadcast on the 20th of October 1995. Guest stars of note include Bokeem Woodbine, who played Salmon Roke, who was in The Rock, the remake of Total Recall, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Oh.
There's Badger Jola, who plays Napoleon and Neech Manley, who has guest spots on Millennium and The Lone Gunman in the future.
Okay.
Ken Faree played Vincent Parmelli, who I knew he looked familiar. He's in Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, of course he is. Yes, I've got him.
But more than that, he's in Dawn of the Dead, the original version, and he's in Dawn of the Dead, the remake.
Ah.
Two completely different characters, as you might imagine. He's also in From Beyond.
Ah, of course, yep.
Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Oh, that's fun.
And he's in Halloween. Unfortunately, it's the Rob Zombie version.
Oh.
And last but not least, because we may have to revisit this guy a fair bit once we're done with the X-Files and London Gunman and everything else, is JT Walsh, who plays Warden Bodier, who had an uncredited role in Misery. He's in Backdraft. He's in A Few Good Men. He's in Loaded Weapon 1, the bizarre spoof of Lethal Weapon. But more relevantly for us, he's in Dark Skies, the X-Files rip-off series.
I know you want to talk about that in more detail later.
It's more, I think we need to do like a sort of stream of the first episode, because it's just, I want your reaction not recorded for the first alien abduction in the series.
All right.
So I remember it going, what the hell is going on? In memory, it's a trifle odd what they do.
I'm very excited.
Good. Okay, so, The List. Napoleon Neech Manley is a death row inmate in a Florida prison. He is taken to an electric chair, but before he is executed, he proclaims he will be reincarnated and avenge himself against 5 men who tormented him in prison. Shortly after the execution, Mulder and Scully are called in to investigate after a guard has been found dead in Neech's cell. They meet the warden, who believes that Neech planned the guard's murder with someone on the outside prior to the execution. John Speranza believes that Neech has returned. When Scully explores the prison's showers, she is confronted by Vincent Parmelli. He claims that another prisoner, Roke, is keeping a list of the remaining 4 victims. Later, the head of another guard is found inside a paint can with premature appearance of fly larvae in his skin. The prison coroner tells Scully that the guard's lungs were completely infested with the larva, which belonged to the greenbottle fly. Meanwhile, Mulder talks to Roke, who wants to transfer out of the prison in exchange for revealing the 3 remaining people on the list. The warden refuses to let this happen, and they later find the guard's headless body in his office. While searching Neech's cell, Mulder discovers evidence of his obsession with reincarnation. They talk to his fearful widow, who is secretly seeing Parmelli. Rook is then beaten to death by the warden after revealing he is the 5th person on the list. After Roke's death, the warden puts the prison on lockdown and tells Mulder that Neech had a violent history with all 3 victims. Mulder believes that Neech has come back for revenge against the guards, but doubts that Roke was one of the names on the list. He requests to be provided with the name of Neech's executioner, who is a volunteer. They arrive at his home to find his decomposing body in the attic. Mulder confronts Speranza about the list, but Speranza will only tell him that Roke was not on it. He claims to have seen Neech outside of his cell, and based on phone records, Scully theorizes that Neech's lawyer may have engineered the murders with Speranza. Mulder and Scully interviewed the lawyer, who tells them about Parmelli's relationship with Neech's widow. Immediately afterwards, the lawyer is suffocated by Neech. The warden visits Speranza and offers to have his death sentence commuted in exchange for stopping the murders. Speranza takes the offer. That night, when Parmelli visits Danielle, who is Neech's widow, she has become paranoid about Mulder and Scully, who have begun staking out her house. The agents suspect Parmelli to be behind their murders and leave to notify the warden, who asks that Parmelli be arrested. While this is happening, Danielle wakes up in the middle of the night to find Neech standing in her bedroom. She follows him with a gun and confronts Parmelli, thinking he is Neech's resurrected form. The agents and police arrive to see Danielle shoot and kill Parmelli. Meanwhile, the warden, assuming that the other names on the list have now been fulfilled, kills Speranza in revenge. Speranza, before he dies, tells the warden there is only 1 person remaining on the list. All the murders are blamed on Pirelli, and the agents begin to leave Florida, but Mulder is frustrated that the chain of events and the evidence do not make sense. He points out multiple inconsistencies in the actions of various players in the plot and the nature of the reincarnation. Scully convinces Mulder that the case is over with and they should just return home. The warden drives past him at this point and sees Neech in his rearview mirror, who steers his car into a tree and kills him. Kind of a weird episode, this one, I think.
I know you feel more strongly about this than I do, as usual.
I know you quite like this one.
I think it's quite good. It's a very dark episode. I even read that in post-production they added a kind of green tint to this one, just to make it look a bit more bleak and dour.
Yeah, I can see that. I can't help but contrast it to things like the Green Mile, which is completely unfair given the Green Mile was much later.
It's your only similarity is that it's on death row, really.
Yeah. I think what got me there was kind of like the euphemisms, because we've got things like they don't call the executioner the executioner, they say the hired man.
Which is literally what he is.
Yeah, but it's just the way they refuse to sort of come out and say what he is. It's always a hired man or he's travelling.
Mm.
I mean, there's a whole tangent here about, of course, this is set in Florida, and of course it's on death row, and all the terrible things that are associated with that kind of thing.
I think that opening with the long walk is really intense as well. There's not a lot of music in it. You don't really know what's going on at this time, and you just get this kind of sinister criminal who has refused his last supper and refused the chaplain, but gives this really angry last word speech where he calls revenge on the people who have wronged him. It's a deeply intense opening that you don't really know where it's going from there.
No. It does feel a bit like Chris Carter decided that this week I'm going to do racism as a plot line again.
It doesn't really focus on racism, though, the episode at all.
It doesn't, but you can't help but... It's hard to get away with all the murder victims are white. Well, no, sorry, all the
prisoners are black and
Yeah.
all of the guards are white.
Yeah. And all of Nietzsche's revenge is against white people who... and we do find out later that the guards have beaten him on a few occasions.
Yeah. And they beat to death, I think, at least 2 other prisoners over the course of the episode.
Yeah, Roke and Speranza are killed directly as a result of paranoia about the list.
Very non-graphically, but it's still very obvious that they've been beaten to death just off screen.
And just to sort of dwell on the prison bit for a little while longer, there's kind of a thing that gets dropped like partway through, which is Scully's understandable nervousness being in that situation at first. She's very on edge in the first visit to the prison, isn't she?
It's a lot like that first scene in Silence of the Lambs where Clarice visits the high security wing.
Yeah, and she does get herself completely freaked out when Parmelli grabs hold of her to sort of say, "Oh, there's a list of the victims,"
As you would.
as you would, and then that just never comes up again. She's completely fine on every other visit.
I also thought the sensitivity levels were a bit off with the two prisoners who were beaten to death, particularly Roke, the first one, is that nobody's suspicious by this. I know they don't really have a reason to suspect JT Walsh's character, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, he was beaten to death. It's a thing that happens. And nobody questions it at all. Whereas in, like, Fresh Bones, they were deeply suspicious of the military guy who was in charge of the base. Even when he was saying, oh yes, it was a complete random beating, they didn't take that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the frustrations is that at no point does Mulder or Scully have any doubt about the warden, isn't it? Because they're sure he's on the level the entire way through, and the audience is fully aware. No, he's a complete bastard.
I don't think Mulder even finds out who the 5 names were on the list. It's only JT Walsh that gets this information.
Yeah,
And that's only on the basis of he knows there's been 4 others because the ones that he's killed that he's made out look like they're on the list aren't. So he's the only person other than Speranza who is cognizant of how many people are on the list.
it feels an odd episode. I'm still going to go back to.
I really like the tone of it, though. It's a really dark Monster of the Week episode, but I think it's a very effective one. It's memorable.
Yeah, I think one possibility, and I know the X-Files dabbles in either direction, I don't think you're ever given an opportunity for a Scully-eye view of what's happening. There's no plausible, mundane explanation for what's going on.
Except there is. Your mundane explanation is that it's Parnelli.
Oh yeah, there was at first, and then that they kind of just dropped that kind of... The audience, I don't think the audience buys into it, really.
As Scully is initially suspicious of the maggots hatching so quickly, but as the coroner explains in the episode, that is a thing, is in hot temperatures, which you have in Florida, that is plausible they could hatch that fast. So that even rules out that potentially as being a supernatural thing, although the episode kind of infers it is supernatural.
I will remind you of your comment while we were watching the episode of Neech is a rubbish ghost.
I'm harking back to, I'm bad with the name, Shadows. Yep, that's the one I'm thinking of. Where the ghost literally is grabbing people by the throat and crushing their throats from the inside. Neech is a ghost who smothers people with pillows.
And again, though, you've lost the supernatural thing because we see one murder, he's literally grabbing a pillow and shivering over the guy's face.
Well, when Scully investigates the scene of the first murder, you see the stains on the back of the pillow.
Yeah.
So it's not even a supernatural pillow. He's picking up what he has to hand and smothering people with them.
Exactly. You want it to be throat crushed from the inside. You want the impossible crime thing again. And it's really odd that Shadows has nothing to do with the list in the end.
No. I guess they are a different kind of spirits because it literally is a grudge in the Shadows, whereas this Neech is inferred to be somebody who has researched philosophy of reincarnation so much that he's figured out how to do it.
Yeah, and that kind of feels like there should be more focus on that kind of aspect or something. I think this is one of those episodes where you kind of want the monster's eye view of what's going on rather than Mulder and Scully's.
Yeah, that's a good argument.
The episode needs to be reframed a bit. We need sort of more what's going on in and around everything rather than focusing it onto the human.
He's less of a ghost and more of a revenant, so you could get an interesting niche eye view of things.
Yeah. And I think, well, also, his reincarnation is... People don't normally reincarnate into ghosts. That's kind of a haunting thing, isn't it? Because unless he's flies, which is possible.
I did wonder for the first few if Neech was a physical entity, but the end one where he disappears from the inside of the car shows that he can at least make himself physical but also incorporeal.
Fitting into the film Ghost again, isn't it?
In Ghost, yeah, I suppose you could argue that.
Because he's got to practice, hasn't he, to be able to sort of interact with the physical world.
But most people still can't see him in Ghost.
Yeah.
You have to be sensitive, whereas he seems to be able to make himself visible by anyone if he wishes so. Unless you've got a hell of a lot of sensitive people in that prison.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Turns out that all guards and most prisoners are sensitive to this. Special effects in this episode I thought were particularly grim. I was reading up on maggot training, which Gillian Anderson noted were the hardest animals to work with in the X-Files, because of course how can you make a fly larvae do what you want it to? But that scene with the first body in the morgue is not a prosthetic body, that is an actor lying there that they've just poured maggots over the top of, which has to be the worst job in cinematic history, I think.
You do get these crazy people who do it. I remember there was a BBC documentary about insects. It might have been Insect Empire. This is like in the 90s. But the one thing I remember of it is there's a shot of a centipede crawling in under the bed sheets on someone. And basically all the stunt performers refused to do it because it's one of the worst kinds of centipedes, one of the really lethal ones. And so it was one of the production assistants said, "Oh, that's okay, I'll do it." And so there's nothing, if it had been him, there's nothing they could do.
Yeah.
So it genuinely has it crawling all over him. And it's
the maggot's slightly better.
Yeah.
Bugs don't bother me in any way, but there is not being bothered by bugs and touching bugs and things like that, and lying down and having hundreds of maggots poured over your face are two different levels.
I would say one slight I do have against the episode is it's really hard to pick out some people's names. I'm thinking specifically Danielle we didn't know her name for most of the episode.
I have her as Mrs. Manley in my notes. I never caught it, I'm afraid.
But I think there's a few, like the warden doesn't have a first name. He's not even credited with a first name.
Does he not?
No, he's Warden, whatever his name was.
I'm still not sure whether he's Parnelli or Parmelli, to be honest, but Speranza's name was the other one I didn't catch the first time round. They mentioned Roke's name several times, but it wasn't till near the end of the episode that I caught Speranza's.
I have him down from the credits as Parmelli.
I guess it's got quite a large cast for a bottle episode as well. This is a lot of new characters that have come in one go.
Yeah. I think the other thing I would say, though, is like the lawyer feels like he comes out of nowhere at like the 3/4 mark.
I guess he could have been brought in earlier because it seems like a logical place where a grudge would have been.
Yeah, and also the fact that he was talking to Speranza and the other prisoners, that he would have more of a presence in the episode and not. And also the way they frame that scene when they introduce him, it's kind of like he's not actually a defense lawyer; he's acting as a defense lawyer. It's how they phrase it.
So what was the list? We've got 2 guards, we've got the executioner, the lawyer, and the warden. That is the 5 on the list, isn't it?
Yeah, which the other problem with that really is the way the warden tells it is that loads more guards helped restrain Neech on one of these occasions when he was badly beaten. I know that this list is 5 names because it makes a convenient TV thing, but I have a feeling it should have been a lot longer and basically most of the prison
We
guards.
don't know what the first victim actually did to him specifically other than being involved in this beating, but the second guard seemed particularly unpleasant as well.
Yeah.
He was really down on him, really negative towards him.
Yeah, he was dismissive of him when Scully asked about him.
Yeah, so I could picture him being nastier than others.
Yeah, the lawyer and executioner, that very obvious lashing out, isn't it?
I think the executioner is to make clear it's supernatural as well, because as the warden says, it's only 3 people knew the identity and Neech wasn't one of them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the contradictions Mulder points out at the end is that Parmelli did not know that name.
Yeah. For one of our reasons why it couldn't be Parmelli. As sinister as Parmelli was for 90% of the episode.
Well, again, I was going to say that's one of the other things I thought was... Because this kind of episode, especially this kind of episode, you want more of an ambiguity thing going on. So, the one scene when he arrives home after the lawyer dies, that leads you into thinking that maybe he's the one doing it, because you only get a very brief glimpse of Neech when he smothers him.
I thought there was actually quite a big inconsistency with Parmelli, and it might be me reading things slightly wrong, admittedly, but it's when Parmelli talks to Danielle, he is very dismissive about the possibility of Neech having come back, and, basically tells her she's being silly, that's impossible. But when he's talking to Scully, he seems to be entertaining it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there.
He's the one who tells Scully about the list and is deeply suspicious and puts us on to the fact that this might be supernatural. But he totally dismisses it to Danielle, who, from the start, is terrified that Neech has come back.
Yeah, and as Scully points out, the most logical person to do the killing is another guard. And Parmelli is basically your best placed person to do this.
It's particularly the guard that's decapitated, because no prisoner would have had access to the warden's office to place the body.
Exactly. So, I mean, as you say, it's a very effective atmospheric episode, but it's when you try and break down what happened and why and who would know what, it gets very woolly very fast.
Yeah, but I do think as a ghost story in a Monster of the Week episode, I really like it. I like the tone. It's that bit with Bradier in the car is just fantastic. Just that hubris moment where he thinks he's gotten away with this, and then you see Neech sat in the back seat.
Yeah. I I also want to say that it's a good job they cleaned the voodoo sign off of it from Fresh Bones, because I think that's the same tree. I don't actually think it's the same tree, but it's a very similar crash.
It is, but it's a lot nastier and a lot kind of gorier than that one. There's quite a lot of blood in that
Yeah.
last crash.
Well, because he has to somehow survive it in Fresh Bones.
Survive or survive?
He was fine by the end of the episode.
He was almost decapitated.
Yeah.
It specifically tells us that in the episode.
And they don't. Anyway, the Fresh Bones problem. I think you had a bit of trivia about the set as well, interestingly.
Oh, yes, that prison set. That was entirely constructed from scratch for them. It took about 10 days to construct it and almost all of the budget for the episode, interestingly. But they got their money's worth because it's used a few more times. I think it's Talitha Kumi and maybe Tesos Des Bichos or something like that. The set comes back in.
Tunguska, I think, is.
Is it Tunguska as well? So at least they got their money out of it that way. But it's quite impressive. I thought when they were on the hall with the cells that it might actually be a real prison set. It was that stairwell when I was watching it that I thought looked a bit like a set.
It kind of mirrors things you've seen in The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption and Session 9.
Shutter Island, I thought, had a similar look to it with the kind of blocks with the spiral staircases.
Yeah. In terms of some slight weirdness in the episode, there's a great bit at the end when Scully has to look through a list of all the guards' photos to identify Parmelli, so they can tell the warden who's been talking to her. And Scully having forgotten that Parmelli said his name at their first meeting.
Yes,
but,
he did.
So I understand she could be shaken. It just feels a bit odd that she didn't remember this kind of pivotal bit of information.
You really are picking now, aren't you?
I am really picking. I just found it because I noted it down, and I'm pretty sure you commented on it as well.
Yeah, it is jarring, but at the same time, her frame of mind was not good that first time she met him, and he had just grabbed her from behind.
Yeah, but again, it's the whole that should have informed every interaction she's had in prison afterwards, and it doesn't. It just evaporates completely. It's a one scene set up to make her uncomfortable, then we just dispense with it.
I'm not sure why she's uncomfortable as well, because we can understand in Silent Alarm as well, Clarice is uncomfortable because she has that horrible encounter with the guy in the cell next to Hannibal Lecter and things.
Exactly.
Other than Parnelli grabbing her, no one's especially impolite to Scully when she's there.
No, there's some lingering stares from the other prisoners, and there's a certain amount of shouting, but she really kept her well away from it, isn't she?
Yeah, it's not like anyone grabs her or says anything to her directly.
Yeah. So it feels like kind of cheated. They wanted the atmosphere, but didn't actually want to commit to the atmosphere.
Yeah.
They wanted to gesture at it and say, you know what it's like. You've seen Silence of the Lambs. We watched Silence of the Lambs.
It was interesting having this episode right after Clyde Bruckman on the basis of how Neech gained his power, because in my head, just thinking of Clyde Bruckman's story about how he gained his power to see how people died due to his obsession with the chance of the Big Bopper being on that plane. In the same time, we've had the same idea as Neech is obsessed with the idea of reincarnation, and he's thought about this so thoroughly that he's figured out how to do it. You've got that transcendence again. Probably wouldn't have noticed it were it not for the fact that we watched Clyde Bruckman right before this, but it was an interesting parallel between the two with them being so close together.
It's a shame that's probably almost completely unintentional due to how they received the rest of them, but it's interesting it's in there.
Yeah.
I think we are going to have to bring up as well, though, Scully's medical training in this episode isn't as bad as it's been in some episodes, but it's still pretty bad. Given when they burst in and Parmelli is shot, who goes to the body? Why, it's Mulder who's going to check if the body's alive. Scully's just going to hang around in the background.
We still never attempt CPR on these bodies either.
It's Scully. You are a medically trained doctor. I know you don't really do that anymore. You could still try a little bit.
But it's the X-Files mandate of running to bodies saying, nah, he's dead. It's in first aid, you've got your Dr. ABCs, so check for danger, responsiveness, airway, breathing, start CPR, I think it is. The things that we don't see anyone ever do in the X-Files. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I am going to pick a fault at this episode. I thought Danielle is the weakest part of it, personally, in that she doesn't really have any reason to be afraid, and I'm not sure why she's in this situation. She has this intense fear that Neech will come back from the dead, and it's not clear what's feeding this fear. If she doesn't know about the list at all, as far as we can tell, so she doesn't fear that he's coming to kill her. Maybe she's afraid that she's got a relationship with a guard, but it also inferred the fact that Parmelli hasn't been a guard there for very long, so he's unlikely to have the relationship with Neech that some of the other ones did. So I'm not sure what fuels her fear and why she's so terrified of Neech.
That's a good point, because you'd think, I can completely see her having an affair with him while Nietzsche is in prison, because there's literally no way he's going to find out.
We should note as well that Neech is on death row, but he's not as violent a criminal as you'd think, because he's on death row because he was a getaway driver. But I mean that if Neech had actually been a gunman or something like that, if he's actually actively murdered someone in cold blood, you could understand why Danielle would be afraid of him.
Yeah, and as it is, he's kind of almost a bystander to this. He is linked to the crime, but he didn't kill anyone, so...
It's only, I think it elaborates in the episode that the gunman involved in this crime was killed on sight and he was the one who was caught.
Yeah. It's a pretty accurate reflection of some of these horror stories you do get in American media of just the hopeless...
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, would you be this afraid of Neech on that basis? Again, ignorant of the list, because if she had a reason to think that he might be coming for her, fair enough, but we're never given that feeling in the episode.
No, I would say actually contrast it to F. Emasculata, I could see it, because they actively were horrible people going back to his partner, wasn't he?
Yeah. His partner who was bizarrely loyal to him as well.
Yeah, but you can kind of see the whole, if she had started an affair and then he died and made some proclamation he was going to resurrect, yeah, I can see the fear getting into her, not Danielle. As you said, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I also thought the prisoners trying to make deals felt like a bit of a weakness in this one. Speranza isn't that understandable his deal because he knows he's not on the list. So Speranza is the only one that we know for certain does know what's on the list. Roke might be bluffing.
Oh, true, but Speranza is on death row, and basically he wants to not be on death row. What is his deal?
They don't say they're moving off death row. They said they'll move into another facility, though. That doesn't mean that he will no longer be on death row.
True. I think we're meant to take the implication there that he's going to go to a facility that doesn't have...
Ah, fair enough. That makes more sense. But Roke, at the same time, with his potential bluff, because it's unclear if Roke even knows who's on the list.
Yeah.
Is what does he hope to gain from making this deal? I'm not sure. And why does he think they'll take it up just to know some names?
I'm guessing it's because the list must purely be spoken. There can't be any written copy of it, obviously. I'm guessing that Roke's goal is much the same as Speranza's. He wants off death row. And if this is the way to do it, because if people are that afraid, take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, but with no evidence, who would take up this deal? It's a stupid idea.
It is, but I think it's the warden's deteriorating mental state, because like when he says to Speranza, just call off the attack dogs, and Speranza is absolutely not in a position to do anything about this.
And just says okay.
Because of course he's going to try and take advantage of the situation as it exists. Yeah,
but I still don't understand, because if Roke's trying to make this deal, Roke in particular is the one that bothers me, is he says, there have been 3 deaths, I know there's going to be 2 more, I can tell you who the names are. It's like, your first question will be, prove it. And he can't do that, so what's the point?
Well, I think we're getting kind of into the kind of territory where, like Kurt Brookman again, with the police talking to a psychic. I think they're banking on desperation, is that you've had 2 inexplicable deaths with no clear culprit.
But they're not inexplicable, they just don't know who did it. There's nothing supernatural about them again. It's not 2 people have had their throats crushed from the inside, for example. It's 2 people have been smothered by a pillow, and there are a number of people we know who could have done this because there's no physical impossibility.
I feel coming back around to my whole, this episode's a bit of a mess.
Yeah, this episode is a bit of a mess. But I still like it.
That's fine. Just, I'm not one of Chris Carter's best, it must be said.
It's only his second one, I think.
It's not, writing-wise. I don't think directorial there's any problem with it. I think it's the writing is the weakness.
Yeah, true. Okay, I'll let you have its average. Is average good enough for you?
Average is good enough for me. Do you have anything else, or shall we go to personal ads?
No, I think we can move on to personal ads.
And so we come to Too Shy, our second episode this week. Directed by David Nutter, written by Jeff Flaming. First episode from him, as far as I'm aware.
Yes, I think he only wrote one other episode.
Which was that one?
It's Helmany.
Oh, okay. That's the one this season, then. First broadcast on the 3rd of November, 1995. Guest stars Timothy Carhart as the inexplicably named Virgil Incanto. I think I can see what you did there.
Best name ever.
He's been in a few things of note. He is the violinist in Ghostbusters. speculated by one of the producers to be the father of Oscar in Ghostbusters 2, given the complete lack of any other men in Dana's life other than Lewis Tully, and they're not letting that one go through. He's in The Hunt for Red October. He's in Thelma and Louise. He's in Beverly Hills Cops 3. He's in Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, which I think the thing we know him best for.
Yeah, I remember him being in that.
He's in Air Force One. He is in Star Trek Next Generation. And it's been a while. He's in Frasier.
Aww.
Other guest stars, we have some X-Files alumnus in the mix. We have Kerry Sandomierski as Ellen Kaminsky, who was previously Tracy in Roland back in season 1.
Oh, that's Roland's friend, isn't it?
Yeah. Would-be girlfriend or future wife, or however you want to interpret their potential relationship.
They're a very sweet relationship.
They're a very sweet relationship. And we also have Glynis Davies, who plays Virgil Encanto's landlady. I don't think she has a name.
Aww.
But she was a doctor in Tombs, and she was the lady being delivered to in Irresistible, who didn't lock her back door and kept the key under the mat.
She attracts a certain type, then.
Yeah, or she gets cast into these certain kind of characters, apparently. But would you like to give us a synopsis for Too Shy?
Sure. The episode this time is set in Cleveland, Ohio. We open to a couple kind of sitting on a lover's lane, flirting inside a car. The man is Virgil Encanto, and he is seducing a young woman called Lauren. The important thing to note about Lauren is she is a little bit overweight. Although Virgil initially seems charismatic and good-looking, although we do notice he has some scabby skin down the sides of his neck, he suffocates Lauren by spitting up this kind of gelatinous substance that covers her mouth. The following morning, a policeman finds the car abandoned in a back alley. Lauren's body is inside it, covered in the same substance. Mulder and Scully are called to investigate this. The victim's description is very similar to those of other previous victims of what Mulder calls a lonely hearts killer. He's a man who is targeting women based on lonely hearts ads that they've placed. Scully tries to perform an autopsy on Lauren's body, only to find that whatever the substance is coating it has dissolved it, leaving only a skeleton and a lot of goo. Scully analyses the substance and discovers it's some highly acidic substance. It contains a similar composition to stomach acid, as well as a digestive enzyme. When she analyses the body further, when Mulder suggests that something may be missing, she discovers it's almost entirely lacking in adipose, body fat, which Mulder likens to the fact that the body, when it was weighed a lot less to what it said on the woman's driving licence. We see that Virgil Encanto is already looking for his next victim. He's prowling an online chat room using a username Too Shy to speak with a woman, Ellen Kaminsky, who goes by the name of Hugs. Again, we see that Ellen is also overweight. Virgil is also interrupted by his landlady, who, unlike what Nick said, does have a name. She's called Monica.
Oh, I don't think that comes up.
Monica has come to the conclusion that Encanto is a writer, and she's obviously very, very attracted to him, though he is not interested in her in any way. He asks her if she wouldn't mind reading some of her poems in the future. He tells her he will, but it's mainly just to get rid of her. Mulder also discovers that Lauren met this man who presumably killed her in a chat room. He researches that user's online accounts. We, of course, know as a viewer that this is Encanto. They find that he has started one account in particular using a credit card that he must have taken from a previous victim. On the urging of her roommate, Ellen stands up Encanto and does not show up to their date. We see Encanto leaving the restaurant, slightly angry about this, dumping his flowers in a gutter. He approaches a prostitute after leaving, finding the most overweight prostitute he can. He does manage to kill her, although she injures him in the process, but is forced to flee before he can dissolve the body. When Scully autopsies this victim, who we discover is called Holly McLean, she discovers that the body's airways are choked with that same digestive substance that destroyed Lauren's corpse. She also finds the skin samples under the victim's nails where she scrawked Encanto. This skin doesn't contain any oils or fatty acids. This convinces Mulder that the killer needs fats to survive and is sucking them from the victims. Scully explains that there could be numerous other explanations for why this happened. Mulder looks into the emails that Encanto sent Lauren. He discovers that they contain passages from obscure Italian medieval poetry and compiles a list of the few people that would have access to these very rare texts. With the assistance of a local detective called Alan Cross, the agents begin to canvass everyone who appears on the list. Unfortunately for Cross, he is the one who finds Encanto, who kills him and dumps him in a bathtub. Meanwhile, Encanto receives another email from Ellen, apologising for her previous standing up of him and inviting him on another date. When they arrive back at Encanto's house afterwards, Encanto tries to coax a reluctant Ellen inside. He quickly retracts his invitation because he sees the lights are on in his apartment. He didn't leave him that way. He goes upstairs to discover that Monica has entered his apartment to leave the poems for him to review. She has found Alan's body in the bathtub in the meantime, but Encanto arrives just in time to murder her to prevent her from revealing this to anyone. However, he is then approached in the apartment by Jessie, who is the blind daughter of Monica. Jessie is told by Encanto that he hasn't seen her mother, however she smells her mother's perfume in the apartment and knows he's lying. She also stumbles into a suitcase as she's leaving, and Encanto tells her that he's about to go away to New York on business. Suspicious that Encanto has done something untoward to her mother, rightly so, she calls the police, who arrive, of course, with Mulder and Scully in tow. When they get there, Encanto has already left, but his computer gives them a list of all the women he's been in contact. They try to contact everyone on the list, but find that 2 are unreachable. One of them is Ellen. They instead send round a kind of PSA warning with a photo fit image of Encanto on it, warning women to be aware and not to be alone with this man. Meanwhile, Encanto has come to Ellen's apartment, and she has let him in before she checks her emails to tell her friend that Encanto has finally come to see her. When she checks her emails, she sees this composite and realises that he is a psychopath. Encanto attacks Ellen within her apartment, but Mulder and Scully arrive before he can kill her. Mulder chases who he believes to be Encanto down the road, but it turns out to be a graffiti artist. Meanwhile, Scully, who has been left doing first aid on Ellen, is attacked by Encanto in the apartment. Luckily for her, Ellen regains consciousness and grabs Scully's gun and shoots him. In the final scenes, we see Encanto in questioning. He is very, very clearly getting sick from his lack of fat. His face is covered in flaky skin, and he seems very unwell. Mulder shows him a list of missing persons, and he claims to be responsible for all of them. He claims that he has given these victims what they wanted in return for what he needed, though Scully points out the fact that he is indeed a monster in every sense of the word. As they leave, Encanto states, "Il morti non sono più soli," or "the dead are no longer lonely."
Thank you. This episode is one of those charming relics of 90s TV which could only have existed at that point in time. Because sooner than this, you wouldn't actually have the concept of online dating. Later than this, everyone's going to turn around and say, "What are you talking about? What is going on?"
You're also in that slightly innocent time where we didn't have a concept of meeting dangerous psychopaths on the internet.
Yeah.
Because, now everyone's wary about meeting in public places, making sure your friends know where you are, all that sort of thing. That your friends know who you're meeting.
Exactly. And there's so much in this episode. I mean, the one that got me right at the end of the episode is when the FBI is sending the warning around with the photo fit. And all of you people who use computers, just think these days, if you saw an email pop up saying FBI warning, you're deleting that and putting it in spam because there's no way that's real.
I love that photo fit as well, because unlike some of our previous X-Files miracle photo ships, it looks literally nothing like him. I thought it looked more like Mulder.
Ah, it's him! But we've got some weirdness on it, like the localized internet warning system. Because of Jeff, you don't know how the internet works, do you?
To be fair, I don't know how the internet works other than computer magic.
Basically, unless the entire area was under the control of one ISP, basically you can't do that.
Okay, fair enough.
And it's very given the.
It's not like where you put a warning out on a local TV station.
Yeah, because it's coming from one central broadcast going to everyone else. So if everyone in the entire Ohio was on one ISP, sure, you could probably do that. But I would be skeptical, especially at that point in time. There's a bit of computer magic, as you might imagine, with the unformatting the hard disk and unencrypting all of the files. Which, fine, why not? This is not on the level of our computer enhancing security footage stuff. Though, in terms of weird continuity, there's just the bizarre one at the very start of the episode, where Virgil and Canto and the woman are at the start, parked in the car. Doesn't look like the same place where they find the car the next morning, but the woman has stayed in the driver's seat the entire time while being digested.
That's true. I guess we must assume it is the same place.
Yeah.
Though I thought it was more of a lover's lane. It looks like it's abandoned in a back alley.
Yeah, it looks like it's been moved, so I'm not sure what was going on there. But also, we find out that Virgil has great accuracy, given they say, oh, we found none of this liquid anywhere but on the body. It's like, really? He's just dumping goo on her and nothing has slid off of her.
It kind of makes... I think he's grotesque, but it's an interesting monster because he's essentially a fat vampire. Like we had Toombs as the liver vampire earlier.
This is... we're skipping over the actual vampires to go on to the fat vampire.
I think these are more interesting than the actual vampires. But it's a bit like Brundlefly, the fly movie with Jeff Goldblum, where he can just spit an acid over people to pre-digest them, essentially.
I would be very surprised if that was not in the back of someone's mind while making this.
Mm.
We have got a bit of Mulder being a complete jerk again, given that he's really quite sure of what's going on, but doesn't bother to brief Scully before they go down there. But also, as I think you noted, okay, so, Scully, autopsy's fine. Ritualistic body in the woods, it's fine. The maggots in the list were fine. The dissolved women left with lots of goo and just bloody goo and just skeletons, they're all fine. Desecrated grave, that's right out.
I want to know why that dissolved woman doesn't smell of anything either, because Scully notices it dripping down the outside of the thing. I would like to assume that a dissolved person smells unthinkably bad.
You would think.
Well, that stuff he spat up is basically digestive juices, so how bad it smells alone when someone's thrown up. So to throw up that's then dissolved an entire human body.
Oh, well, okay, I can do you the biology of this one.
Okay.
What you're smelling when someone throws up is not hydrochloric acid, it's bile. Bile comes from a bile duct.
Okay.
So there is a reason. Hydrochloric acid does not smell like that.
But when you've used hydrochloric acid in science in school,
there is a smell.
It has a distinct smell to it. And imagine that smell would be even worse if it had dissolved flesh or something like that. That kind of burning sinuses smell it normally has to the nth degree with dissolved flesh in it.
Well, we come down to the usual problems of mimicking light and sound is relatively simple. Mimicking smells, touch, and what the hell is the fifth day? Tastes are basically implausible, if not impractical. So it's why it always gets dropped, because no one thinks of how to express this unless you're specifically thinking, I need to make clear it smells really bad.
It's one of the things that always gets me in horror movies is that no one can smell blood. And, even a tiny amount of blood smells terrible. If someone's just been murdered in your bathroom, it would smell atrocious and you'd smell it from the hallway.
Yes, well, and yesterday we went to see Evil Dead Rise, and the level of gore left at the end of that film, that someone just wanders through completely blindly in the last sting.
It's literally the equivalent about 4 people exsanguinated she manages to walk past.
I think it's possibly up to 6, so the monster was quite a number of things at the end.
Yeah, but the fact that she can't smell this amount of completely exsanguinated corpses...
Until she actually notices the blood everywhere.
Bodies don't have a scent in movies unless you've seen them first, and then you can gag.
This episode is a weird return to the Scully encounters sexism in law enforcement, which feels like it comes out of the blue again, doesn't it?
It seems a bit weird in this one as well, because it's Detective Cross, isn't it?
Yeah, he just suddenly says, oh, I'm old-fashioned, and...
But he seems quite accepting, and, he's got Mulder on board, knowing Mulder's reputation and stuff like that.
Like, oh, women doing autopsies? Pshaw! Like, what? Who are you?
To be fair, Scully fails to do the autopsy.
Well, that's true. I'd like to see a man come in and do this autopsy.
Maybe a man would have been able to do an autopsy on a skeleton.
I did not think about that, it must be said.
But yeah, it is. I want to say it's ridiculous, but it's not. Any woman that's kind of worked in a sort of man's role has experienced this level of absurd sexism.
Yeah, but it's one of these things, though. I think it's like smelling dead bodies. Only if the writer thinks about it, it gets included, because all the rest of the time, Scully breezes through with very little pushback.
Normally the only pushback comes, like in the episodes we saw where things have fallen under military law and they just blanket her out.
Yeah, it's not normally sexism, it's normally just, it's the conspiracy coming against you. But every now and again you get these weird bits where it's a case of, oh yeah, Scully would be having problems. Why is this not part of the show Bible? This is like big letters. Scully is in a field where women do not normally do well. She's going to have issues.
I imagine it would be one of those things where, although realistic, it would get frustrating if it was happening all the time.
Indeed. So
if Scully is literally never left alone to do an autopsy.
And this is like, a lot of people made this point about things like Game of Thrones, is there's all the objectionable stuff, which is included for realism. But it's a fantasy novel. The dragons don't exist either. Just do the fantastical thing. Just drop all this stuff you're including because it's apparently realistic.
I've often seen it as an argument for you can't have that many gay characters in this fantastical medieval setting.
Yeah.
It's like, why not? It's fantasy. Why can't we have this?
Yeah, let's actually embrace the concept of fantasy. And the X-Files is already fantastical as it is. A case of, let's just drop the sexism in work thing because it's not doing any of us any favours. It's just drawing attention to the times when this doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen a lot.
It's one of those things where if it's a point of the series and it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're just one writer every season is just remembering this as a thing, it's not as effective.
It's pointless. But again, what this also comes back to is this is the kind of thing that showrunners are meant to nix. They're meant to sort of say, we haven't been doing this. It's going to really be odd to bring it up now. Let's chop this. Because you only need to cut a handful of lines and you're actually fine in this episode. It's not a lot, is it? We have to compare it to Irresistible, where that was so bound up with Scully's attitude in the whole episode. You can't take that out. But in Too Shy, you could nix all the sexism lines and not suffer anything.
Well, you have series where they've made it work, like, I'm thinking Lagerta in the early series of Dexter.
Yeah.
Where part of the point is she's a woman in a position of power, and she's coming up against it a lot because there are a lot of people who think she shouldn't be there. But that's her character arc, and it's constant.
Yeah, I think Parks and Rec initially had that as well, and they kind of tapered off, but there was a lot of Leslie Knope was struggling because of her attitude versus the rest of the government.
Yeah.
So, other series have done it, but they've done it more sustained and longer and actually had it go somewhere.
Yeah.
The X-Files is, we haven't done sexism against Scully for a while. If she's got any family members left, we can murder another one of those.
We know she's got at least 2 brothers.
It's 1 per season so far. Who gets to go in season 3? Oh my god, that's actually... No, wait, no. Melissa died in season 3. Season 2 was fine for her.
Yeah, it's every other season.
Every other season, okay, so...
Everyone's fine till season 5.
Yep. So, it's hard to ignore, if you're familiar with it at all, the strange reference. Obviously, there's a real logic to the reference, but it still feels out of place. Of Holly McClane, of all people, being name-checked in this episode.
Yeah, I think we both laughed when we heard that.
Holly McClane?
Holly McClane, of course, being the female lead of one of my favourite movies of all time, Die Hard. She is Holly McClane because her clients are Johns. So, John McClane's. I love it. I have no problems with this.
I don't think they do, but it feels like they should have shot some stuff in the building when they moved to LA. This production moves to LA in season 6.
The Nakatomi Plaza.
Yeah, which is 20th Century Fox's building.
Mm. If they hadn't been in Vancouver in that season, it would have been really good to be the tower in Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It looks futuristic.
It does, yeah, they could have done that, but no. So the other thing that dates the episode a bit technology-wise is this whole point of Virgil and Canto is quoting rare 16th century Italian poetry. We're going to have to set aside how anyone figured that out. Because I'm pretty sure that's not Mulder's wheelhouse. So someone else in the police force has to have noticed this. Because it goes by so fast you don't think about it they say, it's 16th century Italian poetry. It's a case of, this is a rare thing. How do you know that?
I love we've got a list of names of the 6 people who might have access to this or
38.
whatever. 38 people who have access to this. And we didn't take one look at the list and think, Virgil and Canto, that's him. Because just for the unordained, it's a reference to the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. Virgil is the name of Dante's guide, and the chapters of the poem are called the cantos. So he's literally Virgil in Canto.
It's like the least subtle literary name you could possibly have. But who told Mulder it was 16th century poetry? That person must be suspicious. But then you get the whole, who do people who received these books? And in 1995, I can kind of see that. These days you'd say, I'm sure it's on Project Gutenberg. Or there'll be some other archives on the internet where we can find this. and you cannot track this person down by looking for the books. It's only because the internet was a quite different place. Though I would also sort of say it's not impossible that there's an online archive even in 1995, because as you noted, he gets his rare poetry through the post, and we see it, and that's a newly bound book. That is a freshly printed thing. That is like a year old at best.
I think the only thing I could argue is when I studied philosophy at university, some of the annoyingly expensive texts we had to get hold of were super rare because they were so limited run. So it was, even though this thing had been published within the last 5 years, they'd published so few copies of it that it was really hard to get hold of it for the course.
Which I do understand to a point. But again, there's that logical leap between he's using this language in one of his online postings. It's from 16th century poetry.
Imagine it in today's era where it'll be, 10,000 copies of that book has been sold on Blackwell Books in this year alone.
Well, I'm also thinking too shy, and a kind of more modern saying is he's not got enough emojis in there.
Or a string of numbers after it, because there's already been 87 too shies on the site.
It's like, you could probably make the claim in 1995 that only a few Kajagoogoo fans have decided to call themselves too shy. And yes, that is really the band's name. I love the name Kajagoogoo, it's great.
Shame you only know them because of Too Shy to Shy.
No, I think they sang The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Oh, did they really?
I'm pretty sure that's them. But, I mean, it's one of these... In the 90s, there was a concept of online aliases and how to sort of use them as another form of identity. And a lot of people did admit it was very shaky because there's a book by William Gibson called Count Zero. A lot of people wanted to call themselves Count Zero. So many so, you couldn't be sure which one you were talking to at any point. Because everyone was Count Zero. So yeah, I mean, a lot of Kajagoogoo fans on dating sites call themselves too shy.
It's the cute names, though, that are easy to remember in the course of a bottle episode, but also have a meaning, because, you've got the overweight woman who calls herself Hugs.
Yeah.
Though I will note, that is very blatantly not an overweight woman, it's a woman that we've put in a very unflattering shirt for these shots.
And done her hair awfully. Yeah. What have they done to her hair? I'm sure your roommate looks fine. Could she not help you a bit?
So for the brutality of the episode, because I think so far Too Shy has been one of the scarier episodes, in part because of the fact that he only targets the most vulnerable of people. So you have the fact that it's not a commentary on being overweight or anything like that. He has literally found these vulnerable people who have the thing he needs, being an excess of lipids. And he is deliberately targeting them by making them feel loved so they come and make themselves more vulnerable to him.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely horrible, horrible MO that makes him possibly the most evil villain we've seen so far, because, as Scully points out at the end, is he's not just preying on their bodies, he's kind of preying on their minds and their feelings as well.
And absolutely with no guilt.
With no guilt whatsoever, because he is taking what he needs, but in the sense of the X-Files monsters we've seen so far, Toombs was an animal. He wasn't just targeting people's weaknesses like this, he was attacking people like a predatory animal. Too Shy is deliberately targeting these people, and because he knows that they are an easy target.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing the episode doesn't really dwell on is that he is a serial killer and has been doing this for some time, having jumped from personal lives to the internet.
Yeah, we don't know how many people he has killed, but it looks a big list when Mulder says which of these are yours at the end, and he says all of them.
Yeah, although I think I'm going to go with I don't trust him as far as I could throw him at this point. Because he could be saying anything at this point. I mean, why fight?
We know, based on his treatment of things like poor Monica, the woman who loves him unduly and apparently can't tell the fact that he detests her.
You do feel that Monica, please just meet someone else. Also, how many poems have you written you can't slide under his door? Because that is a thick envelope she's trying to stuff under there.
True.
Like, I've just got a few poems. You've written 2 books worth.
But at the same time, it shows that he isn't just targeting people that he needs to. He kills both Monica and Cross, neither of whom have what he needs.
No, but they are about to expose him, so yeah.
So he is just killing indiscriminately anyway.
Interestingly, that's reminded me of no one can smell things in this episode unless you're blind. Because Jessie can smell the dishwash soap or whatever that Encanto's using on himself. She can smell her mum's perfume in the apartment.
I did wonder if the soap thing was a reference to the fact that he's consuming fat as well, because of course dish soaps are made out of fat.
Yeah.
is that it's not so much she's smelling his soap, is she's smelling what he's eating.
Oh, it could be. But she's got a remarkable sense of smell that no one else has.
That's the blind sight thing, though. This misnomer in films that if you're blind, all of your other senses are heightened.
Yeah.
So she's got her super sense of smell that means that she can tell that Encanto's bad when no one else can.
And the audience can get it from just the whole, he's just being a complete dismissive jerk to you.
The one that got stuck in my head with her sense of smell was the blind girl in the Langoliers, my favourite bad horror movie of all time, who can hear the bad things happening. The sound of, like, Rice Krispies are made before you add the milk, or whatever ridiculous thing she says, for the sound of the monsters that no one else can hear.
You mean the Langoliers?
The Langoliers. Watch Langoliers, it's a masterpiece, and masterpiece of bad cinema.
It's free on YouTube, incidentally.
So no one's got any excuse.
No one has any excuse other than you might want 3 hours of your life back.
It's not 3 hours long. Your homework's still to watch Langoliers.
Okay, so we've got Scully's less than stellar track record when caring for people. And apparently no one else has noticed because when they go to Ellen's rescue, Mulder leaves Scully behind to tend to her. I mean, wow, Mulder, you've just killed that woman. Well, he chases down a very convenient graffiti artist who is sprinting along that alleyway.
You know, maybe it's the positivity that this could be Scully's time to shine and actually not kill someone with first aid at this time. She's got to get it right at some point. Mulder trusts her.
Oh, she doesn't get a chance to, though.
No, she doesn't, because, as always, Scully gets attacked by the psychopath.
You think you'd give her a complex by now?
Are we keeping a tally for how many times Scully has been kidnapped or otherwise attacked by the episode's psychopath?
I don't think we have. I think we should make one up and have a tally at the end of the season or something.
To be fair, I think it's been a bit. I'm not sure we've had it since Irresistible.
No, I think Irresistible might have been the last one. This is certainly another instance.
But at least it gives Ellen time to shoot him, which is very satisfying.
Yeah, I'm still amazed that he survived that, because that looked pretty fatal.
The important thing is she got to shoot him.
The important thing is she got to shoot him. I did it was one of these strange things where Scully, as an FBI agent, aren't you meant to know where your firearm is, and you've just left it lying next to this woman in the middle of her apartment?
I guess they were pretty sure that Mulder was chasing the killer away.
Yeah, again, it's very convenient that a graffiti artist decided to just race down the alleyway.
At the same time, on the positive, is if Ellen had woken up quickly and snatched that gun and shot Scully,
yeah,
in a panic, that's why you wouldn't leave your gun lying there.
Do you have anything else for this episode?
My note that just says squidgy hen bone. My only random thought when I was watching the start of this episode was the fact that in a modern series, this would have gone quite differently. And I don't know why that got stuck in my head, because it's no commentary on this episode really, but it's that opening scene with Lauren and Encanto in the car. Is in a modern series, we would have lent into the fact that Encanto was being overly personal and creepy and making her uncomfortable, and then she would have been the killer.
Yes, although I would note that as much as you say it would be the more modern thing, is, as we said at the time, is Buffy did this, and that was literally the year afterwards, I think. It's a concept that was around at the time, and it's in that way it's odd the X-Files lent into the old way of doing things.
We did kind of have it once in the X-Files in the sense of gender bender as well. That was the other one where the character that looked vulnerable was not the vulnerable party. Yeah, I just kept watching that and thinking this would be the whole misdirect, particularly in modern horror. But as you say, it's kind of, X-Files was maybe a bit behind on the times even at this point with making Encanto the obvious creepy guy. Because he is creepy in the sense of Irresistible's creepy, in the fact that if we weren't watching this knowing, yep, he's a maniac, you'd be thinking, oh yeah, he actually is quite sensitive and charming and well-spoken.
Yeah, I don't
think he's quite as smart as Irresistible is.
No, but then he doesn't feel quite as... It feels a bit more natural than Donnie Faster did.
But at the same time, he's more reactionary than Donnie Faster is. Donnie Faster could turn on the charm like a tap. He is murdering people, at least 2 people, and leaving their bodies in his own apartment that is registered to him.
Yeah.
It's not the same level of intelligence that... I think Donnie Faster is brighter on the whole.
True, that Donnie Faster did stuff his home with funeral wreaths, hair, and fingernails.
But at the same time, it's not a dead body in the bathtub, is it?
It's not a dead body in the bathtub.
That was human remains in the freezer, not people wandering in and seeing your lovely bathtub corpse.
It's true. Quite how are you going to get this far without being detected? No, it's anyone's guess, really.
Travelling around a lot, I've got to assume.
Again, it's kind of one of those artifacts of previous time. It's like, can you imagine trying to get an apartment these days without, references and forwarding addresses and all the rest of it? Bank accounts. He doesn't have a bank account.
This is the same discrepancy we noticed in Tombs, though, of
Yes.
how on earth does Tombs have a social security number?
You can kind of gloss over it, I think, at times, but the other times, yeah.
It does specify in this episode that he's a freelancer, so that's why he doesn't need any references to get a job or anything like that. But getting an apartment, you feel, will be a different matter.
Yes, and even as a freelancer, he's got to prove his work to other people, so there has to be a record of him being able to do what he says he can do.
I suppose so, yeah.
He's got to have a reputation, so... Oh, we're picking in the episode too much. It's a good horror episode.
Yeah, I do like Tushai, as grim and as scary as I find it. And I will go with this is the first X-Files episode that's really stuck with me. I think it is a disturbing one, particularly for women.
At least he's kind of... Looks like he's going to die at the end of the episode, so...
I'm pretty sure he's toast. I don't think we're going to be seeing this one back again.
Oh, well, we can... from casting, we know that this is his only appearance in the X-Files, so that's him out.
Thank you, IMDb. Thank you.
Anything else for this episode?
No, I think I'm done.
Thank you all for listening. Next week, we have The List and Oubliette, which are further 2 Monster of the Weeks. We've got a good run of them so far.
That's been our biggest Monster of the Week run so far.
If you want to go over and check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Things Are Getting Strange. The first part of our Let's Play of the X-Files game, the first X-Files game, should be up. We're going to make our way all the way through that one before we tackle Resistance Serve. We've played this one, the first one before, but Resistance Serve, we're going in completely blind and we have no idea what we're going to be doing.
I'd like to note that I last played this one when I was at university as well, so it's probably a good 15 years ago.
Otherwise, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsaregettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can check out our social media. We're on Twitter and Tumblr with the username GetStrange42. We are on Mastodon at getstrange42@universedon.com, and on Facebook if you search for Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com. Licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening again, and until next week, remember...
The dead are no longer lonely.